Picture this. You agree to act as a lookout for a friend. The plan is simple. You stand outside a convenience store, keep watch, and he grabs the cash from the register. But while you're waiting on the sidewalk, the situation escalates. Your partner empties the till, then drags the clerk to the back and commits a violent sexual assault. You never agreed to this. You didn't even know he was capable of it. So when the police show up, are you legally on the hook for his act? Most people instinctively assume the answer is no. In 2001, this exact scenario unfolded at a small eatery in Tacloban City. At 5 in the morning, a man named Judito Coratana and an unidentified accomplice staged a robbery that resulted in a horrific assault. When the case reached the Philippine Supreme Court, Coratana argued he was totally innocent. He presented himself as a pedicab driver who followed the same work routine every day, claiming he had no part in the violence at the eatery. The Supreme Court ruled that whether he personally participated in the sexual assault was irrelevant. Because he was part of the original robbery, his physical involvement in the rape did not change his legal liability. Under the doctrine of special complex crimes, agreeing to a robbery means you are held responsible for every crime committed during that robbery. To understand this ruling, we have to look at the timeline. The crime began when Coratana and his older accomplice entered the eatery, threatened the cashier with a knife, and took 1,100 pesos from the drawer. Moments later, the older accomplice forced the woman into a cramped bathroom, bound her hands and ankles, and sexually assaulted her. Normally, robbery and rape are distinct charges, but Philippine law fuses them into a special complex crime. This hinges on animus lucrandi, the intent to gain. If the primary goal was stealing, any resulting rape is swallowed by the robbery, creating one indivisible felony. The law uses this doctrine to ensure that perpetrators cannot minimize their role in the chaotic violence that a robbery set in motion. Coratana argued that since the victim was tied up and facing away, she couldn't definitively prove his voice was the one she heard during the assault. But the court applied the doctrine of conspiracy. When two agree to rob, they become a shared legal entity. One's actions are both's. To escape this liability, a co-conspirator must prove they actively prevented the assault. Coratana provided no evidence of intervention. He was arrested by the Philippine National Police after the victim identified him as a resident of a nearby neighborhood who frequently attended local festivals. The robbery also extended to the exit. On their way out of the building, the men stole the victim's bag and a co-worker's bag containing 1,800 pesos. The lower court called this simple theft because the bags were taken without immediate force. However, the Supreme Court corrected this, ruling that the entire event was one continuing crime. The court held that a criminal impulse is a single wave of action. They refused to chop the event into smaller pieces to give the perpetrators a lighter sentence. The final verdict for Coratana was reclusion perpetua, life imprisonment without eligibility for parole for the special complex crime of robbery with rape. He was also ordered to pay heavy civil and moral damages. However, the court did not award actual damages for the stolen cash because the prosecution didn't provide specific receipts to prove the exact amount lost. The court's reasoning recognizes that a robbery creates a volatile environment where one act of violence leads to another. The Philippine legal system does not allow offenders to choose which consequences of a group crime they are willing to accept. When you cross the threshold to commit a crime as a group, the law holds you responsible for every act committed by your partners.